and Twitter. And if you like audio podcasts, check out Profiling Evil on your favorite podcast platform. And you can look even deeper into some of the things we're doing by going to profilingevil.com and check out our story maps or our new unsolved homicides or missing persons crowdsourced map. It's a place where you can enter crimes and missing person cases from your own community. And together, we can work on these things together. And while you're at Profiling Evil, sign up for the BOLO. That stands for Be on the Lookout, and it's our digital newsletter. And the only way you're going to get the BOLO is by signing up at profilingevil.com. And if you're into reading, folks, check out my books on profilingevil.com, Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult, or She Knew No Fear. And if you buy them through the website, I'll sign them and I'll ship them anywhere in the United States for free. So, share us with your friends. Hit the like and subscribe button, and remember that we'll see you soon at the next crime scene. When federal agents arrived at Ted Kaczynski's little 10 by 12 foot cabin in Lincoln, Montana, they weren't just stepping into the fugitive's hideout. They were stepping into a mind that had been frozen in time. The cabin contained no running water, no electricity, just stacks and stacks of handwritten journals, bomb-making materials, and an unmailed bomb ready for its next victim. For years, the world had imagined the Unabomber was a specter, an intellectual ghost with no real form. But there he was, this disheveled, bearded, stinky man, a brilliant mind eroded by isolation and obsession. The carefully constructed image of this revolutionary, the self-proclaimed savior of mankind, was reduced to a single, undeniable reality. He was just another criminal in handcuffs, somebody who would spend the remainder of his days in prison. And yet, while this guy went to prison where he died, his ideas have not disappeared. Even today, there are those who are reading his manifesto and see him not as a terrorist, but as a visionary. His name continues to surface in discussions of radicalism, extremism, and the dangers of ideological obsession. So the question remains, was Ted Kaczynski merely a product of his own isolation, or was he a warning sign of what happens when delusionment turns into war? Hey, welcome to Profiling Evil, your go-to crime channel where we dive deep into cases just like this one. So if you're passionate about unraveling mysteries and understanding the criminal mind, you've come to the right place. So before we jump into today's case, take a moment, hit that like and subscribe button, ring the bell, and make sure you have notifications turned on so that you get all of our videos as we release it. And please, again, share us with your friends. Now, in part one, we uncovered the ideology behind the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, dissecting the manifesto that fueled a decades-long campaign of terror. In part two, we followed the manhunt that finally exposed his face behind the bombs. A former Harvard-educated mathematic genius living off the grid in a tiny Montana cabin. And now, in part three, I want to take you inside the final moments of Kaczynski's reign of terror. From the FBI raid on his remote cabin to the stunning evidence that proved beyond a reasonable doubt that he was the Unabomber. But the story didn't end there. Kaczynski's influence continues to spread, with disturbing echoes in modern-day extremists and radical ideologists. Could Kaczynski's writings have inspired a new generation of terrorists? And does the case of Luigi Mangione, that accused killer of healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, suggest that there's a chilling new connection to the Unabomber's philosophy? Get ready for the conclusion of the Unabomber, a mind unraveled. Theodore Ted Kaczynski is now remembered as a domestic terrorist, a brilliant mathematician, but an ideological extremist. His manifesto inspired debates, but it also created new waves of radicalization. Even today, some people are seeing this guy as a prophet of the dangers of the technological movement. Others see him for what he truly is, a man who couldn't find his place in the world, so he tried to destroy it. From a seasoned perspective of 40 years in law enforcement, I think it's critical to ensure accurate representations of key figures in crimes. And I thought it would be kind of interesting to examine some of the similarities between the Unabomber case and the healthcare CEO murder in New York City, starting with Mangione's fascination with Unabomber Ted Kaczynski. Luigi Mangione, a 26-year-old Ivy League graduate, was arrested in December of 2024 for the alleged murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Investigations into Mangione's background revealed a complex web of motivations, including a notable admiration for the Unabomber, Theodore Ted Kaczynski, and most importantly, to his manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future. On Mangione's Goodreads account, he actually reviewed Kaczynski's manifesto, awarding it 4 out of 5 stars. In his review, Mangione acknowledged Kaczynski as, quote, rightfully imprisoned, close quote, and he criticized his violent methods against innocent people. However, Mangione also noted the manifesto's prescience, stating, "It's easy to quickly and thoughtlessly write this off as the manifesto of a lunatic, but it's simply impossible to ignore how revelatory many of his predictions about modern society turned out," close quote. Mangione further reflected on the necessity of violence when other forms of communication fail, saying, quote, "Violence never solved anything is a statement uttered by cowards and predators," close quote. Well, in my opinion, Mangione's writing suggests that he resonated with Kaczynski's critique of modern society, particularly the dehumanizing aspects of technology and the industrial advancements that are going on. Now, this alignment is evident in Mangione's own manifesto, where he expressed disdain for the American healthcare system, labeling industry leaders as parasites who continue to abuse our country for immense profit, close quote. Mangione laments that despite having the most expensive healthcare system globally, the U.S. ranks poorly in life expectancy, attributing this disparity to corporate greed. Now, many people have theorized that Luigi Mangione may have been attempting to model some of Kaczynski's behaviors. This theory is fueled not only by Mangione's apparent admiration for Kaczynski's manifesto, but it also shows some potential visual and behavioral similarities between these two figures. While the connection may not be immediately obvious, the parallels provide some intriguing material for analysis within the true crime and psychological profiling community. You see, predators who model or copycat other predators often do so for a variety of psychological reasons. Some individuals simply resonate deeply with the philosophies or the motivations of infamous figures. For example, Kaczynski's anti-technology manifesto attracted a niche group of admirers who viewed him as a prophet, so to speak, rather than a terrorist. Mangione's alleged admiration for Kaczynski's writing could signify that there's a potential psychological alignment with these ideals, and those might have potentially influenced his actions. Others may copy well-known predators in an attempt to associate themselves by emulating someone like Kaczynski, whose name has become synonymous with calculated ideological violence. Additionally, many copycat criminals exhibit obsessive tendencies, whether directed at a specific individual, an ideology, or a method of operation. And this can be part of a broader psychological disturbance where the individual's identity becomes intertwined with the subject of their fixation. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was famously depicted in a police sketch wearing a hooded sweatshirt and aviator sunglasses. Now, the image became iconic and emblematic of this guy's anonymity, his calculated attacks that were carried out between 1978 and 1995. Kaczynski's disheveled, reclusive appearance and his choice of plain Unitarian clothing reflected his disdain for modern society and technical advancements. So as we look at the case of Luigi Mangione, available images and surveillance footage show him wearing a hooded jacket in surveillance footage. This has led to some speculation out there that he was actually trying to emulate Kaczynski's dress and appearance. Now, hooded garments are a common choice of attire. They're not unique to an individual, for instance. But from a functionality standpoint, they do help hide somebody's identity, something that Mangione was clearly trying to do by wearing not only the hooded sweatshirt, but a surgical mask. Now that said, for a copycat criminal, though, even minor details can hold symbolic significance, intentionally or unintentionally. While Kaczynski's crimes were rooted in meticulous, decades-long campaigns against technological advancement, Mangione's alleged actions, at least based on current reports, seem to stem from a personal vendetta or a grievance rather than a larger ideological motive. However, the admiration he has for Kaczynski's Manifesto suggests that Mangione may have seen Kaczynski as a figure to emulate, even if their motives and methods diverge significantly. You know, the superficial similarities between Kaczynski and Mangione, particularly in their attire, are intriguing, but they don't necessarily indicate a deliberate attempt to copy Kaczynski. The admiration for Kaczynski's Manifesto, though, suggests a deeper ideological connection. But the extent to which this is influencing Mangione's alleged actions still kind of remains speculative. What's clear, however, is that understanding the psychological motivations behind copycat behaviors is crucial in assessing such cases. So as a law enforcement veteran with experience in profiling, I encourage you to approach these comparisons critically, recognizing that while parallels may exist, each case is unique and each case is shaped by a complex interplay of psychological, social, and environmental factors. So let's go in and explore some of the other traits that seem consistent with each predator. And let's look at some of those that are not, making them entirely unique. This will add a level of complexity and personality to the individual crimes and to their motivations. You see, both Mangione and Kaczynski were highly educated individuals who became disillusioned with social systems that they perceived as corrupt. Kaczynski, as you remember, was a mathematics professor, and he retreated into isolation to protest industrial society, ultimately engaging in that nationwide bombing campaign. Mangione, a computer engineering graduate, grew increasingly critical of the healthcare industry, culminating in the alleged assassination of a prominent healthcare CEO. Both men authored manifestos articulating their grievances and justifying their actions as necessary responses to systematic issues and failures. The revelation of Mangione's admiration for Kaczynski sparked significant media attention and public discourse. Some commentators cautioned against idolizing Mangione or interpreting his writings as being insightful, emphasizing the danger of turning criminals into heroes. One noted criminologist suggested that manifestos like this often echo violent men's delusional self-importance and should be regarded critically. Now, Luigi Mangione's engagements with Ted Kaczynski's manifesto highlight a disturbing intersection of intellectual critique and violent actions. While both men raised concerns about societal structures, their resort to violence underscores the perilous path from ideological dissent to criminal activities. Their cases can serve as a stark reminder of the complexities surrounding radicalization and the interpretation of revolutionary ideas. To highlight this thought, let's look at a couple of different themes that seem to me eerily similar, yet distant at times, starting with the core philosophical theme. Kaczynski's manifesto, The Industrial Society and Its Future, argues that technological progress erodes human freedom and dignity. He criticized industrialization as the root cause of societal and environmental degradation and proposed this revolutionary dismantling of the technological system. His ideology centered on primitivism and opposition to both modern technology and leftist politics. On the other hand, Mangione's writings critiqued the American healthcare system, particularly targeting healthcare insurance companies, places like United Healthcare. He accused them of corporate greed, exploitation, and contributing to the declining life expectancy of people in the U.S. His manifesto, reportedly found during his arrest, denounces the systematic denial of claims and connects corporate practices to societal harm. Mangione's focus on healthcare reform reflects a deeply personal frustration with perceived injustices. Criminal behavior manifests itself in both verbal and nonverbal ways, offering profound insight into the thoughts, the motivations, and the emotional state of those who engage in unlawful acts. Verbal expressions can often emerge in the form of spoken or written language. Threats, for instance, are a direct means of conveying harm or coercion, while manifestos serve as written declarations that rationalize these actions and grievances. These manifestos are particularly intriguing as they not only document ideological beliefs, but they also serve as a medium to justify crime and garner support. Verbal expressions such as confessions or boasts might reflect pride or guilt, and they're often laced with attempts to legitimize actions by referencing systematic flaws or perceived injustices. But nonverbal, on the other hand, are expressions that rely on actions, gestures, symbolic communication. The criminal act itself, whether it be vandalism or violence, any kind of disruptive behavior, often speaks volumes about the offender's intent and their message. Similarly, symbols and gestures like specific imagery or attire can signal an allegiance to a cause or an ideology. Even patterns of behavior like retreating into isolation or meticulously planning can hint at a deeper psychological state that shows premeditation. Now, together, these verbal and nonverbal cues can create a rich tapestry of expression, illuminating the mindset of the person behind the behavior. So with this understanding, we turn our attention to the manifestos of Kaczynski and Mangione. Both men relied heavily on their writings to articulate their beliefs and their grievances. Crafting manifestos is a way to frame their actions within a broader ideological context. In their words, we find a blend of rationality and emotion, kind of a calculated effort to persuade and to justify. By analyzing the tone and language of those manifestos, we can begin to uncover layers of meaning. Tone reveals the emotional and psychological undertones of their writings, while the language, the choice of words, the sentence structure, or the rhetorical strategies often provide clues about how they intend to communicate their ideas. These elements allow us to explore the degree to which these manifestos were fueled by logic or emotion. It helps us understand how they sought to validate their views and what similarities or differences exist in the critiques of societal systems. Furthermore, the tone and language used might even provide a glimpse into their psychological profiles, almost shedding light on how they viewed themselves and the world around them. So this exploration is going to delve into the intricacies of these manifestos, seeking to understand how these written documents became not only a tool of self-expression, but also a justification for their actions. You see, through their words, we aim to piece together a narrative of discontent, ideology, and often troubling intersections of intellectual critique and criminal behavior. So let's examine the tone and the language of the Kaczynski and Mangione manifestos. First, Kaczynski. Kaczynski's style was analytical and methodical. His manifesto is structured like a philosophical treatise. It draws on his extensive academic background to kind of critique technological society. Mangione's style, on the other hand, is emotional and critical, if not attacking, using more populist language to highlight these perceived injustices in the healthcare system. Mangione's manifesto reflects frustration and a sense of urgency, but it lacks academic polish, the kind of polish that we see in Kaczynski's writings. Now, perhaps if Mangione had not been captured so quickly, he may have gone on to work and rewrite his manifesto, and it might have shown more order. His references to systematic issues such as claim denials revealed direct and personal grievances that this guy had with the healthcare industry. So when we're considering the targeting and victim selection tactics that were employed by both Kaczynski and allegedly Luigi Mangione, we need to keep in mind that it appears that both men chose victims who were symbolic of their grievances rather than individuals that they had personal ties with. Now, Ted Kaczynski targeted university professors, airline executives, and technologists as representatives of his industrial and technological attack. His assaults aimed to disrupt systems. He believed these systems were destroying nature and destroying human freedoms. Mangione, on the other hand, allegedly targets Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, as a representative of the entire healthcare industry and their exploitive practices. The choice of Thompson highlights Mangione's focus on corporate greed and systematic corruption in healthcare. It wasn't about Brian Thompson. It was about what he represented. So when we evaluate the psychological profiles of Ted Kaczynski and Luigi Mangione, it's evident that their mental states were shaped by distinct factors, rooted in different aspects of nature and nurture. One of his psychiatrists actually noted that Kaczynski's delusions centered on the belief that modern society was maligning and harassing him. These beliefs became the foundation for his justification of violence. He saw his actions as a rational response to societal oppression. Now, Kaczynski's psychological state reflected a significant biological component, his mental illness, and it was further exacerbated by these external factors. His participation in controversial psychological experiences during his time at Harvard and his self-imposed isolation probably amplified his paranoia and solidified his anti-technological ideologies. But Mangione, on the other hand, he's not been formally diagnosed with any mental illness. However, reports suggest that he was struggling with depression, anxiety, chronic back pain, things following a back injury that required some surgery. Now, these challenges were compounded by feelings of alienation and frustration that he had with the healthcare systems, particularly as someone deeply disillusioned with its profit-driven motives. But unlike Kaczynski, Mangione's struggles seem to stem primarily from environmental factors rather than intrinsic biological predispositions. Chronic pain, system failures in the healthcare industry, social isolation, all probably contributed to his mental state, shaping his actions as reactions to his immediate circumstances. Now, it was actually the parallels found in specific passages, though, that really intrigued me as I looked at these two and their manifestos. Despite their differing psychological profiles, certain parallels can be drawn between the writings of Kaczynski and Mangione, particularly in the language and the framing of their critiques. In his manifesto, Kaczynski wrote, quote, "The industrial system requires people to live under conditions radically different from those under which the human race evolved," close quote. Now, similarly, Mangione's manifesto echoes this sentiment with the statement, quote, "The healthcare system forces Americans into unnatural dependence on the profit-driven corporations, exploiting their need for basic medical care," close quote. Both passages highlight each person's disdain for the systems that they viewed as oppressive and unnatural, albeit with different focal points. Again, Kaczynski critiquing technology and industrialization, while Mangione targets the healthcare system. Which leads us to a psychological comparison that gets a lot more interesting in my opinion. The psychological contrast between Kaczynski and Mangione underscores the interplay between the nature and nurture argument of shaping behavior and motivation. Kaczynski's actions were primarily driven by an intrinsic mental health issue, including schizophrenia. His paranoia and delusions provided the foundation for his violent anti-technological ideology, which he perceived as rational and necessary in order to respond to the threats that he believed that society posed to humanity. Mangione's motivations, in contrast, appear to have been rooted in environmental stressors. His chronic pain, ongoing frustration with the systematic injustices in the healthcare industry, those things were shaping his worldview, and they drove his actions, in my opinion. Now, unlike Kaczynski, whose mental illness was long-standing and deeply intrinsic, Mangione's behavior seems to reflect a reactive psychological state, one that's shaped by immediate circumstances of his life and the challenges that he was facing. Now, this contrast highlights the distinct pathways that can lead individuals to act on their grievances, whether they're through intrinsic psychological predispositions or through environmental pressures. And to kind of point these out, I want to just put a chart up on the screen here as I talk and talk about the comparisons between Mangione and Kaczynski with a little bit of a psychological point being proven. Let's look at those. So to make this easier, on this chart, I'm going to list across the top an aspect, these themes that we're talking about, and then we'll talk about Ted Kaczynski compared to Luigi Mangione, and a little piece of psychological insight, just to kind of put this in a nice, concise chart. Now down the left-hand side, under aspects, again, we're going to talk about what we've been discussing, the core theme, the tone of the messaging, the victim selection process, paraphrased ideas, a mental health diagnosis, and a call to action that they have. So, as we talk about core themes, Ted Kaczynski had an anti-industrialization critique of technology theme. Luigi Mangione, on the other hand, had a critique of the healthcare industry. So the psychological insight from this is Mangione appears to have adapted Kaczynski's framework to address his healthcare grievances. When we go back and talk about the tone of the manifestos, we see that Ted Kaczynski was analytical and methodical, while Luigi Mangione, on the other hand, was emotional and critical, which leads us to a psychological insight that would suggest that Mangione's passionate tone contrasts with Kaczynski's academic rigor, a real difference in core personality. When we look at the victim selection process, Ted Kaczynski, his was based on academics, tech leaders, airline executives, while Mangione was clearly focused on healthcare, the parasites as he called them. And if he had gone on in his crime spree, we may have seen different people, but I doubt it would be that way. Which leads us to the psychological insight that in victim selection, both people were targeting symbols of systematic oppression. Now let's look at the theme of paraphrased ideas. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, clearly was focused on technological slavery, while Luigi Mangione was focused on healthcare parasites. Now, from a psychological insight, this reflects Mangione's ideological borrowing from Kaczynski, if in fact he did borrow from his manifesto. Under the theme of mental health diagnoses, Ted Kaczynski was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. Luigi Mangione, there has been no official determination that I'm aware of, although his appears to be chronic, pain-related depression and anxiety. The psychological insight out of this might be that Kaczynski's actions were biologically driven, while Mangione's were situationally driven. And finally, the call to action from the manifestos themselves. For Ted Kaczynski, it was to dismantle the industrial system. Luigi Mangione, to confront corporate greed in healthcare, leaving this psychological insight that shared revolutionary rhetoric reveals parallel motivations. So while Luigi Mangione's grievances focused on the healthcare industry, his manifesto borrows heavily from Ted Kaczynski's ideological framework. Both manifestos reflect deep dissatisfaction with societal systems, and they justify violent action as a means to provoke change. Kaczynski's actions stemmed from intrinsic mental health issues, while Mangione's motivations, they appear to be more reactive to environmental stressors. So understanding these parallels and differences provides critical insight for profiling potential copycats and addressing psychological underpinnings of extreme behaviors. The Unabomber's capture in 1996 ended one of the most infamous manhunts in FBI history. Kaczynski's trial was swift. His life sentence, unavoidable. This guy would never again live freely in the wilderness that he so fiercely defended. But did Kaczynski really stop? You see, long after his arrest, Kaczynski's ideology remains alive through his manifesto, a manifesto that's being cited in extremist circles, referenced by those who see technology as a growing threat, even praised by individuals seeking to justify their own acts of violence. Which brings me to this chilling question. Are the words inside of the manifesto of the Unabomber, his philosophy, still at work in the world today? When I think of that question and cases like that of alleged killer Luigi Mangione, it raises disturbing comparisons. Not only did Mangione praise Kaczynski's manifesto, his own writings appear to bear eerie similarities to the Unabomber's worldview. So the question for me is Luigi Mangione a copycat, or is this something much deeper? That's a question that I hope you'll enter your thoughts in down below in the comments section. You see, the Unabomber might be dead now, long forgotten, but his ideals are still out there. Now, a new group of people are idolizing Luigi Mangione for his alleged acts of violence and for his own manifesto. The real question for me isn't about these two has-beens, it's more about who's listening to them and going to become the next killers. In the last 3 videos, we've walked through the philosophy, the crimes, the manhunt, and the capture of one of the most notorious criminals of the 20th century, the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. While his remote Montana cabin revealed everything law enforcement needed to convict him, his influence continues to live on. Even today, Kaczynski's manifesto continues to circulate, as do his ideas that are being praised by certain ideological extremists. Some of those, as discussed in these videos, have even followed in his footsteps, crafting their own manifestos, carrying out acts of terror, and seeing themselves as warriors against modern civilization. Which leads me to one of the most disturbing questions of all. Was Theodore Ted Kaczynski a lone wolf? Or was he just a member of a big pack of wolves that included people even like a Luigi Mangione, who are left in the wake of his alleged destruction, but carrying on his vision? Well, folks, if you enjoyed this in-depth analysis, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button at the bottom there. Please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so that you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. And remember that you can find Profiling Evil on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you like audio podcasts, make sure you're checking out Profiling Evil podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. Hey, thanks for your support of Profiling Evil. If you want to make a donation, you can do so at the links below or on this QR code up here. But nonetheless, know I appreciate all your support and I appreciate you listening. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.